That whole model of the 1 hour recare appointment, when we keep asking, review the medical history, take their blood pressure, do this, do that. We keep adding all these tasks in that hour and still expect them to be able to accomplish it all and in an hour, and clean the teeth and educate the patient and do all of it. Take radiographs. You just keep this list. Hygienists should be wearing capes because they're superhumans. I took a leap of faith. When I started doing careers risk assessment, I assumed I was putting myself out of business, because if I could start, rather than looking at the lesions and treating those, if I could figure out what was causing the lesions in the first place and correct that, they'd stop getting cavities. And now I've accomplished what I wanted to do, but suddenly I'm not getting paid for restoring lesions that they don't have anymore. The interesting paradox to that was, once I did that, it was suddenly like, oh, you have my best interest at heart. You want me to stop getting cavities. Well, they'd never heard that before.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists, episode number 410. I'm your host, Andrew Johnston, and thank you so much for spending time with us today. So on the heels of last week's note about the ATOF newsletter that we send out twice a month, well, we sent out the newsletter with a huge typo right there in the subject line that made us look absolutely ridiculous. It's definitely not the first time that we've done something like that, but I don't think it's ever been in the subject line. So anyways, I thank you all so much for not just jumping all over me and just sending me nice, supportive, encouraging messages. I really appreciate that. We had one of our emails came from Rob. He's a dental hygienist out of Michigan. And for those of you that don't have the newsletter, basically what it was in the subject line was about lead aprons. And instead of spelling it L-E-A-D, I spelled it L-E-D. And so when Rob read this, instead of reading it like lead, like you'd lead a horse to water, which is where my brain was apparently, he read it as LED, like LED lights. And in his email, he described the most fun, amazing dental appointment for a kid that had LED lights all around the apron. And you know how we offer, hey, what flavor do you want for your varnish, or what flavor do you want for your prophy paste? He was saying you could give them options for their favorite color or different color sets or things like that. So honestly, it's a great idea, Rob. If you want to run with that idea, I think there's something there. Although in the email or in the newsletter, I did say something about we're probably not going to be having aprons around very much longer anyway. So that might not be the best idea ever, but I thought it was really fun. So if you want to get in on the newsletter list, make sure you head over to atale2hygienist.com. On that website, there's going to be a pop-up that happens. It doesn't happen every time you go to it. So if you decline it once, it probably won't go. So you might need to use a different browser or a different computer. But you'll go to it. You'll just put in your name and email. It's so simple. And you'll get your newsletter twice a month in your inbox, and hopefully less typos next time. For today's episode, we welcome back Dr. Kimkutsch to the show. Misty and I had a chance to catch up with him at the ADA SmileCon. And it was just one of the best conversations. I mentioned this last week, but we had gotten so far into the conversation without hitting the record button that there's no great segue into, hey, by the way, we're doing an interview. So heads up there, you're going to hear kind of like an abrupt start to it. You're jumping right into the middle of a conversation. But if I remember correctly, and I don't want to undersell this, I believe that we started out by solving the ADA. I think that's the very beginning part of this episode. And if that wasn't enough, Dr. Kutsch then led us on this journey about the secrets and tips and tricks of how to run a successful practice when it's focused on the time that's spent in the chair with a dental hygienist. I don't think it's a secret that we could all be utilized a ton more, but we need real leaders like Dr. Kutsch to lay out that game plan for others to follow in their positions of power. So really, really great episode. Next week, we'll have a fun episode. That sounded bad. It was really fun talking with Dr. Kutsch too, but this one's a really fun one with Kara Reck and the office manager in her office, Shannon. We talked about establishing workplace culture, which doesn't sound like a fun subject, but trust me, it really was. I think sometimes the hygiene team, we tend to try and blend into the office rather than being like a corner piece of the culture. And we just want to do our work, keep our head down, and just try and get through the day. But a great workplace culture could make or break our careers. And that's kind of what we talk about a little bit of, in this height of burnout, people not liking their job or this or that. It's largely because of office culture. And so we talk about that. I don't want to say it was nonstop laughs, but I mean, it was a really, really, really fun episode to record. This week I am heading to Greater New York at the end of the week. I hope to see you all there. I think that is all for this episode. Have a great Thanksgiving and enjoy this episode with Dr. Kutsch and guest co-host Misty Mattingly.
A tale of two hygienists.
And it could be like SmileCon with ADA plus ADHA, something like that. And they could have like a section that ran for hygiene, and you could have.
We have all these hubs in here.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a hygiene hub?
No, I didn't see one.
Right.
But that's what I mean. Like that's where.
But that should be here.
There should be here.
But also to your point, though, like I think if you're marketing this as the ultimate team event,
right?
You have your, and they already have team stuff. They have assistant stuff here, right?
But that's sad they don't
hygiene.
have hygiene. That's really kind of.
Maybe, I mean, I think they still have hygiene stuff, but it's not to the same extent. But that, you're right, the marketing of it could be changed and make it.
Yeah, and I think you could really, I think you would have more attendance if it was marketed together.
So is the ADHA having the same issues and declining membership and et cetera, right?
Yes.
From what we understand.
So there has to be some collaboration opportunity there that might benefit both organizations, right? I was on the Oregon Dental Conference Committee for a lot of years, and I happened to be on the committee when one of the bills that came up to the state was the independent practice of dental hygiene. Well, the Oregon Dental Association fought hard against that,
of course,
right? And so that really alienated the Oregon Dental Hygiene Association, who used to meet with it was all one roof, at the Oregon Dental Conference. So they started having their own conference. And at the same time, in Portland, as a competing conference for the hygienists. And so I went and brought in the top hygiene speakers. I mean, we brought in like a half a dozen of the top hygiene speakers in the country and brought them in for the Oregon Dental Conference. And a year later, their independent conference died because the hygienists all looked at who was on the programs, and they came to ours, and it brought them back under the roof, and which is where it needs to be.
Yeah.
It is. It needs to be a partnership.
You need to be. I mean, I need to be sitting in the class with my hygiene team.
Well, exactly.
Right?
Learning the same thing so that your communication later.
When we go back to the office, we're all on the same page. Right?
Exactly.
And the fact that we separate it out so much, I think I personally would love to see an association for everybody.
Right.
All under one umbrella, single for doctors,
you are pipe
hygiene.
Dreaming so hard right now.
I know.
Let's sing it.
But doctors, hygiene assistants, because I think that I still, one of those things, like I said earlier.
You're not wrong, but it's a control factor, though.
I know it's that fear, but.
It's are we doing the best thing for each other and for our patients? People, I don't know. Power corrupts. I think that's where I got to get in.
But we got
to make changes.
We
absolutely
we have to make changes, and if we don't make changes, then all of it's going to die.
I would love
and that's the reality that we've got to really be mindful about. Is ADA and ADHA does a fabulous job of representing their members, right? And we need that representation and that leader in our fields, right? Because really, they're the only ones that's protecting our professions.
Yeah.
And so, but also, they concentrate so much on protecting their profession individually versus protecting the actual the world of dentistry, right? Like, what's best for the patients? What's best for our auxiliary staff, right? It's not good for at this meeting. It's not good that we have everything else and we don't have hygiene here.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it creates that separation.
Yeah. And I think ultimately looking at what best serves the public, the patients, and the underserved population that don't have access to care, right? How do we create momentum to create as an entire profession? Because that's one of the biggest problems we have in the profession is I've been in this for almost 50 years, hadn't changed. 50% of the population still don't have a dental home. Yeah. They didn't have when I graduated from dental school. They still don't. And how do we change that? So people still don't have, half the population in this First Nation country doesn't have access to care. Right?
That's really sad,
we haven't solved that.
But I think a lot of people so let's go back to this idea that we're all going to do the same conference. And I've been a couple years out of school, we'll say, and I go to a conference and I sit in a course with my doctor about how can we, and this is maybe not a good word to use, but monetize. How can we have a successful practice treating the underserved population?
Right.
There was a model for that. And I'm all about it. My doctor's like all about it. We together as a team would figure out how to do that and implement it. We would maybe create satellite offices. We would do remote dentistry. We would do teledentistry, all these different things, right? But if we don't, I think a lot of people are like, we like to be partners with people on projects. We don't like to be individualistic. We're not like, oh, it's too daunting of a task to undertake. But if we were here at the same meeting and we heard the same things, we could easily implement it. And that goes across all things. Mm-hmm. AI implementation, new instruments.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
And we're tribal. We're tribal. And it takes 3 people to create change. And when I was trying to create change in my own practice, it was like I went to the 2 critical people on my team, both hygienists, and I knew that if I could get their buy-in, like, it'd happen. And if I didn't, it wasn't going to happen, right? But I couldn't make it happen by myself.
Oh, absolutely. Nothing is done.
And so I got the buy-in from the 2 hygienists. I took them to lunch and I go, listen, here's what I want to do and here's why. And I think this is like the most appropriate thing, the best thing we could do for our patients, right? It ended, money aside, this is what we need to be doing. It's the ethical and the right thing to do, right? And I got the buy-in from those 2 people, and it was like, all I had to do was get out of the way, right? I mean, it's like lead follower, that's my motto, lead follower, get the hell out of the way. And you got to know when to do that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But that whole book on tribalism, 3 people are the most effective at creating change in a group like that.
Oh, that's so smart. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Can we go back to that conversation? Because I think you oversimplified that conversation a little bit. You're approaching your hygienist with a change. And I think that's you in the DSO world for sure is a big issue. Mm-hmm. We had it, every practice I've ever been in. How do you have that? How do you even begin that conversation of, hey, I want to try something new without someone feeling like, one, they've done something wrong or that this whole career they have been doing something wrong? Like, how do you approach that in like an altruistic way to get the buy-in?
Well, I think you can't. I made every mistake when I started with Carrie's risk assessment, right? I mean, I literally made every mistake conceivable because nobody knew how to do it. I mean, we were literally the first out of the gate to give this a try in clinical practice. Mm-hmm. And so I made a lot of mistakes. And so, it was like, this is like the ethical thing to do, right? How do you get that buy-in? It's like, okay, I can't apologize. We didn't know better, right? Up until that point in my career, I thought the drill was a treatment for dental caries, right? That's what I was trained in dental school, And so I was doing what I was trained, and then I kind of had an epiphany, an awakening, and started looking at all this scientific research. And the internet was exploding at about the same point in time, and suddenly I had contact with like the best dental caries researchers and cariologists in the world, and I had access to them. And literally, they love that topic. It's what they've devoted their life to. And somebody comes along and says, hey, I'm really interested in this. Could you help me with this idea? And I mean, every single one of them responded back to me. I mean, there wasn't anybody I contacted that said no. And, and so then I took that, and then I had this awakening, and I went to my team, and it's like, this is how we've done it all this time, but I want to do this. I want to shift and do this. And I explained it to them, and it's like, okay, well, I had to let go of the fact that I'd been doing it wrong for the first half of my career, but I didn't know, right? You only know what you know, and once you know, you do better. Once you know better, you do better.
Right.
And then once I understood that, I couldn't not do it.
Yeah.
But then the challenge was trying to get my team to understand it and embrace it and do it, right? And the challenge was immediately got stuck on the hygienist, right? Are we?
Well, yeah, we're recording now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm like, wow, this is pretty good stuff. Oh, God, I'm admitting all my mistakes.
Once we started saying good things, I hit the record button. No, doctor.
So, I went, this got thrown on the hygienist, right? So here's this risk assessment form. It's like 30 questions that you need to fill out interview style in your operatory. And by the way, so this is going to take, another 5 to 10 minutes of your hour appointment.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're not charging the patient for it, and you're not getting paid extra. It's
a tough pill to swallow.
and it was like I had a mutiny on my hands, right? I had 4
Right.
hygienists who were all like wanted to kill me. And that whole that's another topic. That whole model of the 1 hour recare appointment, when we keep asking, review the medical history, take their blood pressure, do this, do that. We keep adding all these tasks in that hour and still expect them to be able to accomplish it all
in an hour.
And clean the teeth and educate the patient and do all of it. Take radiographs. You just keep this list. Hygienists should be wearing capes because they're superhumans, right? I mean, I literally, my hygiene team and I sat down and we were frustrated, and actually my team at Carry-Free came up with a solution for me because they were outside of that box. And they said, well, what if the patient filled out the risk assessment form and self-reported their risk?
Right.
And so we take it out of the hygiene operatory, thought, hey, well, that's, we should give that a go. And 2 things happened because of that. Number one, it took it out of the hygiene operatory, so that whole pressure was off of the hygienist. So suddenly it was like, oh, I'm more willing to look at this idea because it's not creating havoc in my life, right? And they saw the benefit, like they understood why we were doing it, but it's like literally physically, if it's not possible and it's stressful, I mean, everybody hates change anyway. Everybody hates change, right? That's human. And then the other thing that really changed dramatically, which I didn't anticipate, was the whole psychology of this change. And you've had this experience. You sit down with a patient and you say, oh, it looks like you have a dry mouth. And the patient says, no, I don't. You're done, right? I don't care how much science you have, or you can talk until you're blue in the face, but if they don't perceive the symptom that you think they have, you're wasting your time because you are not going to convince them, right?
Right.
And the interesting change was then the patient self-identified, oh, yeah, I do have a dry mouth. And then they came into the hygiene operatory. It's like, well, I've got a dry mouth. What are you going to do about it? Like, right? I mean, it was like...
So the expectation is different.
The expectation was instead of me trying to convince them something that they didn't have, they're telling me something they identify and they want me to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? And that changed it just changed the entire conversation, and suddenly it just took off in my practice. Like those 2 changes, but it came from outside of my practice. It came from my team at Carry-Free when they were like brainstorming, like, well, how do we make this? Because other dentists at that point in time were trying to make it happen in their practice too.
Sure.
And I was frustrated because it's like, here I am. This was my driving belief, and I couldn't get it to happen in my own practice. And here I'm trying to teach other people how to do it. And John Featherstone couldn't even get it implemented successfully at UCSF, and he was dean right at the time. So understanding all of those challenges, was an interesting process.
Let me ask this, because you've obviously, now that all that has been implemented, you have made a profitable model off of prevention.
Yep.
Misty comes from DSO, right? I come from DSO.
Right.
It is a lot harder to have a conversation in like organized dentistry, in my opinion, to have our doctors try and profit on prevention. So and maybe I'm wrong on what you guys do there, but like, I still feel like it's that restorative model is what our DSO doctors are focusing on.
They do. I mean, we've been focusing a lot. I think AI has really helped this, and focusing in a lot on like those early care, the watch, right, and eliminating the watch. And so, we utilize Curodont. There's code coming out this year that'll help with that. And so we just really focus in on like that comprehensive care for the patients, and then provide them the tools and the education to help them with that, like Carrie's risk assessment, looking at those things and prevention. But you are right that the doctors are often, like when we first launched Curodont, they were very like, oh, this is going to take away my restorative, treatment. And I kept saying like, it's not. These are the things that you're not doing anything with, right? These are the things that you look at and say, it's just the start. It's, and I hate that limiting language too. Like it's just a little cavity, or it's, like now you have something like you can utilize, your Previdents, your fluorides and things like that to help with remineralization. Then Curodont's another layer to that actually helps grow hydroxyapatite back, so real tooth structure. And so, but the dentists were very like hesitant with it because they felt like it would take away. And then when I just kept saying like kept pointing out to them like, this isn't one that you would have filled anyways, right? Like, unless and this is what you're going to sit here and just put a watch on. So why not help this patient preventatively? Because also it helps build that trust with the patient, right? It gives them the opportunity to treat them for real disease, right? This is a real carious lesion, but not in a way that patients are fearful. So it gives us an opportunity to build that rapport. So when they do need a crown or those other things, we have that. And it's just getting their mindset to change around it, because you can very much. I mean, look at medicine. They make it work with preventative procedures. So why can't we in dentistry? Now, the bread and butter of dentistry is never going away. So I think that's never, ever going to go away. There's still going to be plenty for everybody. And I think that, you know, we just got to care. Like you said, 50% of people we don't even get to touch.
And Misty, dental caries is getting worse, not better.
It's getting worse.
It's like, you know, when I graduated from dental school, I want to go all the way back to the 70s, because this whole topic goes back to Bob Barkley. And when he published his book on preventive dental practices, like I think in 1972, his fear was that dental insurance was just in its infancy. And his fear was that we would become procedure-based, and that we'd be paid only for a restoration or doing some procedure rather than being reimbursed for our knowledge, right? And we don't have diagnostic codes in the profession. That's a glaring issue, right? Because so we don't get paid for our knowledge and expertise. We just get paid for when we do a filling, or even do a curodont, or, you know, do infiltration, do any of that, right? And so that really, in my mind, is a huge challenge that we have in the profession going forward when you start talking about prevention. But you brought up the trust issue. And in my own practice, you know, I took a leap of faith. When I started doing caries risk assessment, I assumed I was putting myself out of business, because if I could start, rather than looking at the lesions and treating those, if I could figure out what was causing the lesions in the first place and correct that, they'd stop getting cavities. And now I've accomplished what I wanted to do, but suddenly I'm not getting paid for restoring lesions that they don't have anymore, right?
Right.
And so I thought I was probably putting myself out of business, which was like, isn't that everybody's goal at some point anyway? And patients would ask me, so, well, doc, if this really works, aren't you kind of putting yourself out of business? I'm like, and I'd laugh and go, yeah, and then I get to go fishing, right? You know, and so I felt okay with the fact that this is the evolution of my career anyway. And the interesting paradox to that was, once I did that, it was suddenly like, oh, you have my best interest at heart.
Correct.
You want me to stop getting cavities. Well, they'd never heard that before. And suddenly it was like, wow, this person is like, okay, that doesn't fit in my model of, you know, the dentist trying to sell me all this stuff. And then once they became decay-free, if it worked, and they became decay-free for like a couple of years, and for the first time in their life, and they understood that I know what causes cavities now in my life for me.
Right.
I've corrected that. I'm decay-free. I'm healthy. You know what? They would come in and go, I want 20 veneers. I want that beautiful smile. And I'd be like, yeah, I mean, the tipping point for me, I'll never forget this lady. She'd been in my practice forever. She was in her 80s. Sweet little gal. But she was missing 3 posterior teeth on her right mandibular quadrant. Every time she'd come in for years, I would recommend a 5-unit bridge, and of course she'd say no, and you know, and it got to be a game, you know, right? I wanted to, and I wait at different points of the, you know, different parts of the appointment to approach it and, you know, have it with her, and she always said no, and so then eventually I gave up. I just quit, right? Now the woman is in her late 80s, and she's lived her entire life without those 3 teeth, and she says to me, Dr. Kutsch, she had another clean checkup, Dr. Kutsch, is it too late for me to get that 5-unit bridge? And I looked at her with the look you have on your face. I'm like, why would you possibly want this 5-unit bridge now? And I'll never forget this. She looked at me, she said, because now I know it's going to last. And I went, oh, once people have...
Wow, that's powerful.
Have control of their disease and have confidence in their health, and they feel like they're in control, they want to remodel. They want all new cabinets in the kitchen. I mean, they want a total remodel job.
Well,
and so, ironically, I got people decay-free. And instead of putting myself out of business, I ended up doing more large restorative cases and cosmetic cases than I had in my previous career that people were asking for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a paradox. It was crazy to me, but so many dentists have experienced the same thing. And now I look back on that, and it just makes sense.
It does make sense. And so, I mean, I think that you're just going to see that as we continue. And we've got to get our dentist and hygienist, we just got to get everybody on the same page and not be scared of that. I mean, I think hygiene, we're definitely much more preventative based, or but I think that
yes, but I think we
doctors,
almost go though too far with the perio. We're not too far. We're not going too far, but like we almost, as a profession, are saying we are perio. That's what hygiene is.
Well, and that's what
You're
I love
like
about Curidon.
Gum therapist.
Gum
right,
therapist.
right?
Yeah. That's why I love this idea. Just we talked about burnout. Like, that's the other thing. Like, I love like local anesthesia. I love like Curidon, the hygienists be able to place it. The hygienists do sealants, hygienists doing whitening, all those things, because I want them to focus in on the whole overall and not just be generalized and only perio focused. Yeah. Because not every patient's going to absolutely need perio, right? Like, patients need to be part of everything. And so I really like the fact that, how we utilize our hygienists to be able to do all those different things. So it really does help with that burnout and gives them that, they're an oral healthcare provider and not just, we do focus in on perio because that is, but all of those things are part of that as well. It's a whole comprehensive looking at a patient comprehensively, with the caries risk assessment, oral cancer screenings, all of these things are part of what we should do versus, just that scraping.
just
teeth.
identifying tooth wear or erosion.
Yeah.
Opening the door.
I just did something this week about that.
And TMJ and joints and aesthetics. Is there something about your smile that you'd like to change?
Right.
Just looking at a big picture at the patient, right? Getting back to real quick, Andrew, on the topic that you brought up about how do we monetize prevention? And I just got an email while I've been here. I haven't had a chance to read, but in this month's JADA, Jeremy Horst sent me an email. There is an article about that and looking at preventive, minimally invasive, early interceptive kind of treatments. Actually ended up, it was a theoretical model, but they looked at it and it actually ended up being more productive monetarily than a traditional model.
Interesting.
I have to read that.
And I would love to
is
link
it,
that in the show notes.
And for like a first time, because one of the challenges has always been, they look at me and go, well, I don't get paid for that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And how am I going to do that? I don't get paid for that. And it's like, well, it's the right thing to do, and we all know it's the right thing to do. So you do it because you know it's right, and you don't worry about the finances because those always take care of themselves.
Well, if you always do what's right for the patient, the rest always falls into place. Always follows.
There's a whole checklist of things that we could do. Talking about sealants and oral cancer screenings, there's so many things, and I think the goal for every clinician should be, I want this to be the fastest, easiest appointment possible. But in order for us to get to that day, we need to make sure we place good sealants in the appropriate spots with the patient who is able to retain them, and et cetera. Like our bite is off. It's not, our bite is on, so it's not going to chip those out. Getting to that point years later where we're like, okay, we're just really taking it easy with the perio maintenance appointment, double checking all of our work, we're good, and we're done. I think that should be the goal. But what you said earlier is like, we're never going to run out of work. Like there's so many, so many things we could do.
Like I said, 50% of the population doesn't even have a dentist.
Yeah.
So, and think about what we could do with prevention for that 50%, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's painful to think about. Right?
I just think about like, even if, and this right here is like way probably, but I've been thinking about like just outside the box and, public health, right? Because that's one of the things that I love, I'm passionate about public health, and I come from a state where we have lots of dental shortage areas and so forth. But, things like even like if we could if we could use teledentistry maybe to have a conversation with the patient and then send them fluoride at home or, things like that. And then is there a way that you could be compensated for that, right?
Sure.
But then that also means that's a less visit into the office. Think about how many you could do and how profitable you could make that.
But Misty, what if we're reaching that half of the population that we were never going to see anyway?
Well, that's what I mean. So it's new organic growth that you would have never have had.
So depending upon how you got, rewarded, for that or paid for that teledentistry and that appointment, that's stuff you wouldn't have done anyway.
Correct.
Right. And we're helping that serve that half of the population. And I think the dental therapist model works in a lot of those remote communities. I know that Doug Young has done a lot of education up in Alaska and remote communities with the tribes there with dental therapy. And, the profession, we fought that so hard, like 30 years ago, because we saw it as a threat. And now it's like, I see it as an opportunity for us to help those people. And, to help that population that's underserved or doesn't have access, period.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm even thinking that dental hygienists and dental assistants could be utilized more in delivery of care, right, to populations. So I think there's huge opportunities here for us. We just have to figure out how to make that work. And that's maybe one of the challenges for, all of our associations to work on.
I don't know how comfortable you are speaking to this. The way I know it is, Oregon has been kind of, I guess, traditionally. Well, let me back up. I would say once the restorative hygienist got kind of in on the books, we're going to do this, and that was 2011, maybe in Oregon,
somewhere there. Yeah.
Once that was kind of accepted, I mean, the world expanded and opened up in Oregon. There was so much more collaborative efforts. Dental therapy has passed, I believe, and there are dental therapists programs in schools there. I can't remember if it's OHSU or someone specific,
I think there's
or whatever.
A number of programs there. Yeah.
How would that be implemented? Let's just speak just to Oregon and kind of like the models that, because there's also, if I remember right, what is that called? What's the dental, the state insurance called?
ODS, Oregon Dental Service.
We called it something else. Well, in Washington, it was Apple. What?
Right.
All this.
Yeah.
So the state insurance, though, was actually very good about paying.
MOTA.
Was it MOTA? Is that what it is? It's pretty good about reimbursements and payments and stuff like that. And as a hygienist, so I'm licensed in Oregon, and I remember I could even prescribe chlorhexidine and fluoridated toothpaste.
You could use a laser.
There's so many things I could do, and I could do that outside of a lot of supervision things. So how would in your best model, how would a therapist be used in Oregon to reach these populations, to generate, income for an office?
I think, just off the top of my head, I would look at underserved populations. I'd look at remote rural communities, right, where there wasn't a dentist. And we still have a lot of those in Oregon, right, where there's small rural communities that are a long way from, they're 50, 80, 90, 100 miles maybe from a dental practice. Maybe we could set up even remote practices or to use dental therapists in that situation to help serve those people.
Would you employ one as a practice owner?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't see it as a threat. I see it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, and I love hearing that. The one thing that always bothers me a little bit about how we talk about safety net settings is for instance, in Georgia, we could do teledentistry, telehealth, but only in public health, not in the private sector, right? And I'm like, but why is it good enough for public health and for those that are less served, but yet we can't do it? Because I feel like we should do the same for them as we do for the right.
And during COVID, when we were shut down for 3 months, quite frankly, we did a lot of telemedicine, right?
And that was the only time in Georgia it was allowed.
Right, and I think in the rest of the country as well, right? but we did, and it worked. And I can, even when I was practicing, I'd have an emergency call on the weekend, and the patient would start describing what was going on. And I go, well, take a photo on your phone and text it to me. Right. Let me have a look at it. And that's kind of teledentistry of some sort.
It is.
And sometimes it was like I could tell them here's what you should do for the rest of the weekend, or no, I need to come in and see you right now. But that was so helpful when I started doing that. Why can't we just do more of that, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's
and
so
I
much
think
you
with
can
AI,
triage.
and I think with AI, because they're taking pictures of my team is running by in the background making faces at me here. So
they're so fun.
If I seem a little distracted, where were we? No. I think with the advent of AI, there's going to be so many things that we don't see today that maybe 5 years or 10 years from now we'll be utilizing that kind of technology for, that will open opportunities for us to treat those populations and those communities that are underserved or don't have access. So, but I have to tell you, Andrew, you know me, I'm contrary, right?
You are contrary to ordinary.
I am contrary to ordinary. When I named the podcast that, Dana was like, wow, you found the perfect name.
Yeah.
But, I don't think like a typical dentist. I guess I come from a world of abundance, that mentality, so I don't feel threatened by, well, let's see how we can make that work to make everything better for everybody.
Right.
So I think maybe a little differently than your average dental practitioner or professional does, but I like to be inclusive, and I like to say, all of us are smarter than one of us, and together we can accomplish greater things and change the world than me just being stuck in this, model that I've been doing, and I'm threatened by any change to that model. We got to change.
Yeah.
Right? The world is changing. I tell you what, if you don't change the industry, I've walked through this floor here and looking at robotics and AI and digital and 3D printing and what's happening in our world of dentistry. It's changed so much even in the last 4 years since I retired from clinical practice that it's like mind-boggling to me. And I'm sitting here thinking like, what's this place going to look like 4 or 5 years from now? And I can't even begin to imagine. But if you're not involved in that change, you're going to get way left behind.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Absolutely.
And so that's the future of us. And I think the future of dentists and hygienists collaborating, being on the same team, need to be under the same roof, in the same classroom, learning the same material, and strategizing together. How can we provide better care and better outcomes for our patients? Because at the end of the day, that's who we work for.
Absolutely.
Right?
Doctor,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on. I'm glad for one, the collaboration part you're absolutely right, is key. But two, you're welcome ADA and ADHA, we figured out your guys' conference problem. You're very welcome for that.
And
we solved
attendance.
that.
And you should actually tag them on this, and so they know that we came up with the idea.
Yeah, we'll do it. But Doctor, if you don't mind giving a plug for your podcast one more time, and then if someone wanted to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you?
So they can reach out to me. Plug for my podcast, Contrary to Ordinary, Exploring the Extraordinary with Dr. Kimkutsch. And really where I'm interviewing and telling the life stories of the extraordinary people I've had the blessing to meet in my career. And a lot of them are in the dental profession, a lot of them are not. So it's like it appeals to a broad range of people. In fact, most of my subscribers are not in the dental profession, which is, and most of the comments I get are people like, wow, I had, and so that really is fulfilling and gratifying for me. And you can contact me through my email address. I'm an early adopter. That's Kimkutsch, KIMKUTSCH at AOL.com.
Oh, you are the original AOL. That was like dial-up days.
Oh, yeah. I'm reading this book on Kevin Mitnick, and who was like the world's most FBI top wanted hacker. He was on the number one on the FBI's most wanted list in the 1980s. And it's his autobiography telling his story, because he spent time in prison, and now he's employed by the FBI, and all these people like to find holes to do these penetration testing, what have you. But I'm reading his book, and it's like he started hacking when he was like in high school in the late 70s. And so he's going through the 80s, and it's like he's talking about these personal computers and dial-up modems and things that we have just forgotten about, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that and how painful that was, right? It's just funny to look back.
Well, and our generations now, they have no idea.
They have no clue.
They have no clue. I mean, my kids don't even know, like what a regular phone is, right? Like, or any of those type things.
Oh,
so
he's talking how he hacked into the dial phones.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And it's like
Gosh.
a typewriter, a telephone. I mean, this generation today has no clue. And what are those things?
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny. That's how old we are.
funny.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been great to be on here with you. And
Oh, well, thanks, Misty. And thanks, Andrew, for
Doctor.
having me here.
Of course. Next quarter, right? We're doing one more?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd be happy to do one more.
Love it. Thanks.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.